The wind cut through the graveyard like a knife, rattling the brittle leaves clinging to skeletal branches. Emily stood still, her coat too thin, her hands too cold, her face stiff with frozen tears. The coffin lowered slowly into the dirt, taking with it the last person who had ever truly seen her. Margaret hadn't just been her grandmother. She'd been her foundation, her soft place to fall, her fiercest defender in a world that never quite knew what to do with someone like Emily. Across the muddy path, Victoria stood like a portrait. Tailored black coat, heels spotless despite the terrain, phone held tightly in one gloved hand. Even her grief looked efficient. She didn't cry. She didn't shift. She didn't even meet Emily's gaze. Mom would have wanted something smaller, Victoria had said days ago, something tasteful. Margaret had wanted nothing of the sort. She'd wanted a string quartet, lilacs in the church, and for her girls to finally make peace. But peace had never been on the table. The service ended quickly, as small-town funerals often do, with muttered condolences and too many cars peeling away too soon. Emily remained behind until the last handful of earth thudded against the coffin. Only then did she turn. "I have to fly out tonight," Victoria said, appearing beside her without preamble. "We're backed up at the firm." Emily nodded. Of course, always. Victoria was the one with the big city job, the tailored life, the Instagram-perfect everything. Emily still lived 10 miles from where she was born. The will's being read tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Brewster and Miles. Emily nodded again, her voice caught somewhere too deep to reach. "Be on time," Victoria added, already walking off. The next morning, the lawyer's office smelled like dust and disuse. The paneled walls were lined with photos of long-dead partners. Emily sat with her hands in her lap, her husband Owen looming behind her, arms crossed, face tight with barely concealed irritation. Victoria took the chair opposite, graceful, even in silence. She didn't look at Emily once. The attorney, Mr. Miles, was gray-haired, dry-voiced, and clearly eager to get through the day. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud the last will and testament of Margaret Louise Donovan. "To my granddaughter Victoria, I leave the beachfront property in Carmel, along with all furnishings and contents therein." Victoria's expression barely flickered. Perhaps she'd expected it. Perhaps she already knew. "To my granddaughter Emily, I leave my shed," the one behind the old orchard, and the truck inside it. A silence fell like a dropped curtain. Owen let out a snort. "Are you serious?" Mr. Miles continued without pause. "These were Mrs. Donovan's explicit instructions." Owen stood, scoffing. "She gets a coastal mansion and my wife gets a pile of junk in a shed." Victoria smiled thinly, as if amused. Grandma always was a little eccentric. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Her throat was dry. The truck had sat unmoved for years, half swallowed by weeds. The shed, barely more than a glorified barn, was where Margaret kept boxes of God knows what. Childhood toys, canned peaches, and her old gardening boots. That's what Emily remembered. Nothing more. "Emily," Owen hissed in her ear as they walked to the car, "this is humiliating. You let her humiliate us." "I didn't know." "No, you never do." Back home, the fight escalated quickly. Owen slammed a drawer. "What am I supposed to tell people? That you inherited a rat's nest while your sister got a beach house?" "I didn't choose this," Emily said quietly, but her voice trembled. "Exactly. You never choose anything. You just take whatever life hands you and smile like a fool." She looked down at her shoes. "It's just a shed." "No," he barked. "It's the last straw." His face twisted into something tight and cruel. "Get out, take your precious shed and go live in it." She stood frozen, disbelief folding around her like a second skin. "You're serious?" Owen turned away, already grabbing her suitcase. "Go. Sleep on a cot next to your grandma's canned beans. I'm done." 20 minutes later, Emily stood on the curb with a single bag and nowhere to go. It wasn't the shed she thought of, or the truck, or even the will. It was Margaret's voice, faint and firm, echoing from somewhere deep in memory. "There's more to that old place than people think." Emily began to walk. The sky was gray by the time Emily reached the outskirts of town. Her boots squelched through damp grass as she made her way past the orchard where the trees sagged with the memory of autumns long gone. The shed stood at the far end of the property, squat and lopsided, its wooden panels grayed and splintered with age. Ivy had crept up one side, swallowing a broken window. The truck sat beside it like a ghost, hunched under a thick blanket of dust and pine needles. Emily paused, staring at the padlock on the shed door. Her fingers fumbled with the keys she'd found tucked inside the envelope from the lawyer. A small, rusting ring, with one key larger than the rest. The teeth clicked in the lock with a satisfying metallic snap. The door groaned as it swung open, hinges complaining after years of silence. The air inside was thick, still. Dust motes floated in the single shaft of light coming through a crack in the wall. Emily stepped inside slowly, her breath forming a pale mist. It smelled like old wood, oil, and the faintest trace of lavender. Margaret's scent. Cobwebs laced across forgotten tools. Boxes were stacked along the back wall, some labeled in faded marker, Xmas decor, garden stuff, toys. But her eyes were drawn to the truck. It sat like a relic, an old Dodge pickup, pale blue under the grime. Emily ran her hand along the hood. The metal was cold but solid. Taped to the steering wheel was a note, written in Margaret's familiar looping script. "For your hands only. Don't be afraid. The truth is yours to carry now." Beneath the seat she found a worn leather satchel. It opened with a soft sigh, revealing a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied with twine, a scattering of black and white photographs, and a folded wool scarf that smelled faintly of firewood and thyme. The photographs were haunting. Soldiers in uniform. Women with clipped hair and hard eyes. People standing in the ruins of what looked like Europe. Some smiling, some staring into the lens like they knew it might be their last image. Emily sat down on an overturned crate and opened the top envelope. Inside was a letter, the ink faded but legible. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've inherited more than a shed. This place holds pieces of history, of sacrifice, of truth no one else was willing to carry. Look in the trunk of the truck, that's where the real beginning is." Heart thudding, she moved to the back of the pickup. The tailgate creaked as she lowered it. A steel box sat in the bed, heavy and locked with an old rotary dial safe. Emily's breath hitched. She didn't know the combination and no key had been left for it. She climbed into the bed, sat cross-legged in the cold, and stared at the box. Something about it felt sacred. It wasn't just a container, it was a vault. Of what, she didn't yet know. There was a smaller envelope taped to the inside of the truck's rear window. Inside was another note. "You'll find the answers in my journal. It's in the cab, behind the seat. Be careful who you trust, especially your sister." Emily blinked, rereading the last line. Her fingers trembled as she reached behind the cracked leather bench seat. Her hand brushed something smooth, leather. A journal. She returned to the crate, opened the book, and began to read. September 3rd, 1941. "Fear is thick like smoke. But we go on. They need me. I can't stop now." October 14th, 1941. The last train left at dawn. I stayed behind. I had to. November 9th, I buried the documents near the well, told no one, not even him. I will not let them fall into the wrong hands. Emily's world tilted slightly. Margaret, her quiet, gentle grandmother, had been part of something bigger than she'd ever imagined. Her fingers brushed over the final entry on the page. The gold is not for profit. It saved lives once. Maybe it still can. But it must not fall into greedy hands. You'll know what to do when the time comes. The sky outside had grown darker. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Emily looked at the safe again. Her grandmother had trusted her with something immense, something dangerous, maybe even explosive. And she had told her not to trust Victoria. Emily suddenly remembered how Victoria had smirked at the lawyer's office, how she'd dismissed the inheritance like it was trash. Maybe she knew or suspected, and that's why she hadn't protested. The phone in Emily's coat buzzed. A text from Owen. "You can still come back. Let's talk." She stared at the screen for a moment, then powered it off. Number. That life was gone. She looked back at the journal, at the photos, at the steel box gleaming faintly in the shadows. Something buried was trying to rise, and she wasn't running anymore. Emily spent the night in the shed. She made a bed from old blankets and her coat, curling up in the corner beneath a dusty window. The journal lay open beside her, its pages filled with entries from a life she'd never truly known. Her grandmother hadn't just lived through history, she had been part of it. A silent figure in the background of events that textbooks summarized in bullet points. As the first light of morning pushed through the cracks in the walls, Emily opened the journal again, searching for answers. December 2nd, 1943. I carried the map beneath my clothes for 2 days. The checkpoint nearly caught me. I lied. I had to. January 15th, 1944. The coins are heavy, but not as heavy as what they cost. I'll never forget her face. March 9th, 1945. The safe is hidden now, not just the gold, the letters too. Every truth that might get someone killed. Beneath that line, in a shakier hand, Emily, if you're reading this, you were meant to. Follow the red X. The red X? Emily turned to the folded map she'd found in the leather bag. They were old, hand-drawn, some on crumbling yellow paper. One had 3 locations circled in red ink. One of them was labeled Shed. She stared at the safe. It had no visible keyhole, only the rotary dial. Her fingers hovered over it. She tried Margaret's birthday. No luck. Then her own, nothing. She flipped through the journal again, looking for numbers. In the margins of one page, almost too faint to notice, were 3 digits, 6-29-44. June 29th, 1944. Emily held her breath and turned the dial. 6-29-44. She paused, then slowly turned the handle. The lock clicked. The lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in linen cloth, lay what looked like stacks of old documents. Beneath them, gold, bars, coins. Heavy and dull with time, but unmistakable. Not shiny like in the movies. This gold was real, historical, marked with stamps she didn't recognize. Emily stared, breathless. She didn't touch it. Not yet. It felt like reaching into someone else's soul. At the bottom of the safe lay one more letter. This gold was entrusted to me by a dying man on a train platform. He said, "Use it to save, not to spend." And I did. I used it to bribe, to feed, to free. I never told anyone, not even your mother. But now I leave it to you. Because I see something in you they never did. You listen, you feel, and you'll protect it. This is not inheritance, it's responsibility. Use it wisely. Margaret Emily read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding. She closed the lid gently, returned everything as it was, and sat still for a long time. Later that morning, she walked 2 miles to the public library. She used a computer there to search for the local history museum. A man named David J. Keener was listed as the director. She called. His voice was young, curious. "Hi, my name's Emily. I think I have something historical." There was a pause. "Can you be more specific?" "It's gold from the war and letters and maps, a journal. My grandmother, she was involved in something. Resistance, Europe. I don't know exactly." He was silent for a beat longer this time. "Can you come in today?" Emily nodded, forgetting he couldn't see her. Yes, I can." The museum sat at the edge of downtown in a former courthouse, its brick facade worn by rain and time. Inside, it smelled of old paper and polish. David met her in the entry hall. Early 30s, messy hair, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp. She opened the bag carefully, spread out the contents on a long wooden table in a back office. David leaned over, not touching anything at first, just absorbing. "Oh my God," he murmured. "These are original photographs. Uniforms, dates, that's Cyrillic script. This is a Red Cross insignia. And that one, look at the collar insignia here, that's Soviet partisan." He paused over the diary. "Is this in English?" "My grandmother translated some entries over the years," Emily said. "The rest is in Russian." David looked up at her, eyebrows lifted. "Do you have any idea how rare this is?" "No," she said honestly. He picked up one map gently. "These red marks, they're movement routes, smuggling paths. This is resistance-level documentation. And if what you say about the gold is true, it's in a safe," she said. "Still at the shed. I have the combination. I didn't bring it." He stood suddenly. "I want to document every step of this, with your permission." Emily nodded slowly. "This belongs to her, and to history. I don't want it to end up in the wrong hands." David gave her a long, assessing look, then smiled. It already ended up in the right ones. The museum buzzed with activity over the next several days. David and his team treated every item Emily brought as if it were sacred. They set up a controlled environment for the photos, began translating the diary, and scanned maps into digital archives. Historians were brought in, experts consulted. Emily found herself answering questions she never thought she'd be asked. About her grandmother, about family stories, about the gold. When she finally returned to the shed with David and 2 security personnel from the museum, the moment felt surreal. She unlocked the safe and lifted the lid. David knelt, staring into it like he was looking at a buried monument. "It's real," he whispered. "This is pre-war minting. You can still see the state seals, it's untouched." They carefully documented and transported the contents under museum supervision. Emily signed a temporary transfer form for public research and preservation, and then the world found out. The local newspaper broke the story. Gold of the resistance found in abandoned shed. Then came TV crews, cameras, microphones. National outlets picked it up. Emily Donovan, granddaughter of a wartime courier, had discovered a priceless collection of documents and gold linked to resistance movements in World War II. Reporters stood outside the shed. Drones circled above. Social media turned her quiet life into a hashtag. Through it all, Emily stayed grounded. She gave interviews, but always about Margaret. Always about the lives the gold had saved, not the treasure itself. That's when Owen reappeared. He left 6 voicemails the first day, then texts. "Can we talk? You must be exhausted. Let me help. I've been thinking about us." Then a voicemail that barely hid his frustration. You know, it's not just yours. We were married. This could have changed everything for us." Emily didn't respond. Then came Victoria. She called with a voice soaked in performative cheer. "Em, I'm thrilled for you. I mean, obviously, I didn't realize what Grandma meant with that inheritance. We should decide together what to do. There's probably legal stuff to sort through." Emily listened silently, then interrupted. "There's nothing to sort. It's all going to the museum. It was never about money." There was a pause. Then Victoria's tone turned cold. "You're making a mistake. Do you know how much that gold is worth? You're sitting on a fortune and giving it away for nothing." Emily looked out the window at the museum van pulling into her drive. "I'm giving it away for everything." She hung up. The next week, the museum hosted an exhibition, the Margaret Donovan Collection. The photos, letters, and even a facsimile of the diary were on display. The gold was kept in a secure case behind glass, explained not in dollars but in lives. How many people had been smuggled out, fed, freed, bribed to safety. Emily stood by David's side at the opening. She wore a simple navy dress and Margaret's old scarf. A woman approached her, white-haired, cane in hand. "I knew your grandmother in Poland, 1944. I was just a girl. She carried medicine through the mountains. She gave me food. You look like her." Emily's throat tightened. "Thank you." The woman kissed her cheek. "She saved my mother's life." Life after the exhibition shifted. Emily moved into a modest apartment in a quiet part of town. She got a job at a community health clinic, assisting elderly patients. It felt right, being close to people like Margaret, people who had lived full, complicated, quiet lives that deserved to be seen. Her phone buzzed sometimes with media requests, but she ignored them now. She was done being the headline. Every weekend she volunteered at the museum, helping catalog other families' artifacts, interviewing veterans, preserving what was left before time erased it all. Victoria, after several weeks of silence, called again. This time she didn't sound angry. "Can I visit?" Emily hesitated. "Why?" There was a long pause. "Because I'm tired, and I think I've been chasing the wrong things." Emily invited her. When Victoria arrived, she looked different. Still polished, still sharp, but softened. She brought coffee and old photo albums. They talked for hours. They laughed, cried, fought once. But something shifted. The wall cracked. "I thought if I had more," Victoria said, "I'd be happier, but I feel hollow." Emily touched her hand. "Maybe it's not about having more. Maybe it's about carrying something that matters." Victoria looked at her sister, really looked, and nodded. In the months that followed, they rebuilt what had been broken. Not perfectly, but honestly.